welcome to another episode of Recovery Real Talk. I'm your host, Angelica Matias Rodriguez, and I have here.
Daniel. What?
That was just so fast. You're like, she's like, Daniel.
Okay. Are you
No, you're
starting
fine.
over?
No.
Oh.
I like it. So do you want to start by just telling me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Southern California in San Diego County, in the northern part of the county. My dad was in the military, so he got stationed in San Diego, and he got out, and we grew up in this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. We grew up in a standard Southern California tract home community, really nice place. The type of houses and community you could buy easily back then on an average job.
True that.
And it was a pretty nice upbringing for, if I'm being honest, generally. It's standard American, youth.
Nice. So were you, when your dad was in the military, how old were you when he got out?
I was pretty young. I think he was out by the time I was in like first grade or something like that. And then by the time I was in fourth grade, my parents got divorced, which was super weird to me and my brother because we're not like those kids who saw their parents fight a lot and knew there was some sort of beef or discontent going on. We just everything seemed fine. And then one day, my dad just comes in while we're playing video games and is like, I'm moving out, tomorrow.
Really?
Yeah. So we were really confused. My parents I think it's their generation. I think boomers don't talk a lot about stuff. A lot of stuff they think it's better not to talk about. So when you don't tell a kid why something happens, they're going to make the own answers themselves. Mm-hmm. And when you're a kid, it's never going to be the right answer.
Right.
Because you don't understand adult stuff. So we spent years trying to figure it out, and you think, is it me? Is it my brother? Is it my mom? Does my dad have a second family? All this stuff. But my dad just up and left one day. And that was...
So are those thoughts you had growing up? Because that's like wild in fourth grade to be like, does my dad have a different family? I don't know though, because my parents got divorced when I was a teenager, but my parents didn't like shield us of their issues. We knew what the issues were growing up.
Yeah.
So your parents must have did a really good job at like shielding that, or they just maybe waited till you guys went to bed to fight or something.
Yeah, I would have preferred they didn't shield us. I would have preferred that I was like, oh, finally they're getting divorced or
That's
something.
How I felt.
I seriously, I would have rather known and had them been honest with me, which is why now that I'm grown and have a family of my own, we tell the kids almost everything, you know what I mean? They're teenagers though, so they can understand things. We don't tell them things when they're super young, but
yeah, definitely.
Because if they don't know, they're gonna prescribe some weird reasoning to your actions, right?
Yeah.
So it just left me really confused. My mom had told me, "Oh, your dad's an alcoholic," and he's gone, right? So for a lot of years, I just pictured my dad being like this drug addict, alcoholic dude, and that's why he left. She didn't bother telling me that he had gotten sober before I was born. So he was a sober alcoholic, right? He had been sober for many years by the time they left. And he did get a new wife and start a new family and all this stuff. And we saw him we'd go over there sometimes and stuff, but it just wasn't the same, So I spent a lot of years just really confused about it.
So how old were you when he met his he's still with her, right?
Yeah.
And then they have kids, right? Do you have other siblings?
Yeah, I have 2 half sisters.
Would you say that it got weird when you and your sisters were born? Is that when you said it like was starting, it didn't feel the same anymore?
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know when exactly you met the wife. My assumption, like I said, because you have to assume everything with my parents, my assumption is that he met her in recovery before he was divorced and
Uh-huh.
kinda said, "Man, I like this woman better than my wife,"
Right.
which is understandable, especially back then. My mom she was kind of a bitch, and
Wow.
she was
No,
a
yeah.
hard ass, and I think he just met someone else and left. Now that I'm older, I can kinda see the signs, but yeah, we had that thing going on where my stepmom was kinda like, "This is our family," you know what I mean? "You guys are the kids from the previous family," and it was pretty obvious to us
Mhm.
that she was not exactly hyped on us,
Yeah.
so that leaves you with the shitty feeling as a child, right?
I've felt that way even as an adult, so I can't even imagine that as a
Yeah.
child, like, feeling that as a child, because I know that I've definitely felt that with one of my parents' partners where I felt kinda like, I feel like they're shutting me out kind of, or I feel like I would get jealous because I had, like, stepsisters
Mhm. For
from one of
sure.
my parents, and I would see, like, my parent doing stuff with them, and I'd be like, "W where was this when I was a kid or
Yeah,
something?" Or like,
yeah.
"Why didn't you ever do that for me?" So I get it, and that's as an adult. I was, like, in my early to mid-20s at that point. So I can't even imagine feeling that way as a child. Like, that's super confusing.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and it was but, we didn't see him too much, we just kinda didn't fit into his life anymore,
Yeah.
and
But he didn't try to, like, either to mend it either, it sounds like, right?
he would pick us up, and we'd go to his house for a couple days, maybe once a month or something, I think, once or twice a month. It always kind of felt weird, you know?
Different, like,
Yeah,
uncomfortable kind of?
yeah,
Like, it wasn't your home.
yeah, exactly, and we just preferred being, at my mom's house. When I think about my life growing up, it kind of seems like we're mostly raised. I don't want to diminish what my dad did in my life, but it did kind of feel like raised by a single mom.
Yeah.
But uh, most every kid I knew, his parents were divorced too. So it didn't seem that weird either. It just kind of seemed like that's how it was.
Yeah, I feel that. I think even still as an adult, I still see people that have families that are together, and I'm like, "Oh, that must be so nice." Like,
Yeah,
sometimes, yeah, like, this last Christmas was my first Christmas, like, quote, unquote, "kind of alone," because my mom went to go see my brother, and I didn't have the time off because we had to work the day after Christmas.
yeah,
And then, my dad, I don't remember where my dad was or what, he wasn't doing anything, and I saw him a little bit, but Christmas Eve is when we really celebrate, and I was with my cousins and their parents, with my 3 cousins, their brothers, and I remember sitting there and seeing them, and I wasn't jealous, but I was just like, "Man, I wish my parents could, like, be cordial enough to, like, spend a open presents together at least." We don't have
yeah,
to have, like, a whole, kumbaya or
yeah,
anything,
yeah.
but, like,
You know what?
just to, like, be cordial enough to be in the same room, you know?
What's crazy is I didn't see after my dad left when I was in fourth grade. I didn't see my parents occupy the same space until my brother had kids. Until there was grandkids, I
Mhm.
literally did not see them in the same room.
Yeah,
That
I
was
feel that.
decades, right? Like I did not see the first time I came to visit, and it was one of my niece's birthday parties, and they were all together at this pool or something. I was like, "Holy shit, dude." Like, they're sitting right next to each other. I couldn't believe it, you
Yeah,
know?
the anxiety too, and you're like, "Oh my
Yeah,
god, is shit gonna hit the fan? Are they gonna
yeah.
fight?" Like,
Grandkids, like, I guess, bring everything together, right?
I've heard
It took a
that
long
from a lot
time.
of people,
Yeah.
actually, but I think the first time I saw my parents in a room, so they were separated when I was, like, 15, and
Mhm.
then when I was almost 17, I had this, like, cyst on my back, and
Yeah.
I thought it was just one of those things that would go away. Well, it, like, rupture it didn't rupture, it was just, like, it's called something, I don't know what it's called, there's an actual thing. It's, like, right above in your tailbone area,
Yeah.
and you have to have it surgically removed. So I had to go to the ER because I was in so much pain, and that was the first time I saw my parents in a room, and they were just like, my dad was sitting on one side of the hospital bed, and my mom's on the other, and he's just like, "How are you?" And she's like, "Good." And I'm just, like, in this hospital gown, like, "Oh my god, this could not get any worse."
Yeah,
So
the
y
the illnesses and kids, bring
yeah.
people together. My my family was never really that close. I don't know, we just weren't really that close. My mom and my brother were pretty close, but we weren't. And when I was in the hospital in 2017, and then my brother got cancer at the end of that year too, and my brother got brain cancer. That really brought everyone together too. It was like everyone dropped all their bullshit from the past that
Yeah.
they had, and like everyone became a lot closer. So it's kind of weird how that happens.
So he's in remission too, right? Like hasn't he been kind of like
They don't call it remission. With the type of brain tumors he has, the best you can hope for is that it's stable, like not growing
oh,
or
so they
whatever.
like shrink it with
Yeah, they do.
radiation and chemo, and then they just
Yeah,
hope that it stays
yeah.
small.
You kind of have to like take these pills because where they are in the brain, you can't remove them because you don't know
Mhm.
what part of the brain you're going to take out. Right. When he
Right.
got some of them removed, he had to learn how to read and write again, I
Oh,
guess.
wow.
And he's a software engineer, so he had to learn how to type again and all this stuff.
Oh, wow.
But the rest of them, they can't do anything about. So he kind of has to take these pills that make it so can't 100% bounce back from chemo. You know, chemo makes you
Mhm.
thin and kind of a little more frail and all that stuff.
Tired and
And yeah, and your hair grow out. Like he's just kind of been like that since 2017 and that's the best you can hope for, I guess.
yeah, my cousin was 18 and she had ovarian cancer. She's been in remission for I think 4 years now. I don't know. I'm so sorry if you're watching this and I don't know. But I remember when I FaceTimed her, I was living in Germany and it was the first time I'd seen her since she like had to shave her head and stuff. And I remember looking at the phone and I remember being calm on the phone, but when I got off, because she just looked so sick
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
tired, and she didn't have her hair and her under eyes like were really dark, and she
Yeah.
looked, and it was scary. And so I remember I got off the phone and I was like, oh my God, my cousin looks like she's gonna die. And I was like all
Yeah.
worried, but she beat it. So that's good. But so what it sounds like is you primarily grew up with your mom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what was
Primarily
that
grew up
like?
with- man, it kind of it felt like my mom and my brother. I I I always felt I've she'd never admit it, right? But it felt like my mom and my brother got along really well because they did, right?
They probably had a lot of similarities too. They
Yeah,
probably like to do the same things and like
he just was like a better behaved kid. He was, I was kind of more getting into trouble and stuff like that. So they got along really well, and I always felt like she definitely favored him,
mhm.
you know? So I would act out or I would feel, not cared about the same or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty like lonely feeling. I remember that feeling like my whole life, feeling like that. They're still really close. And it felt like I just kind of didn't fit in. So it kind of felt like a lot of times I was alone. My mom was really strict and it was like her way. There was no compromising. And my brother was down to compromise and I wasn't, so,
Yeah.
so we would clash and because of that, I just think she didn't know how to deal with it. I think,
Especially, like, on her own too, because like you said, it didn't sound I mean, yeah, your dad would pick you guys up, but
yeah.
she was the primary parent.
And parents they never want to admit it, but I think, a lot of times they're human. They are going to have their favorite kid, for whatever
Yeah.
reason, and I definitely played into it. Like I didn't help the situation or try to make it better with my mom and neither did she. So we kind of just we didn't get along,
Yeah,
we
you guys
didn't get
fought a
along.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah. We
Right.
fought a lot.
Yeah, I definitely agree that I mean, yeah, people are human, they could have I don't know, though, because I've heard different perspectives of where people are like, "Oh, I could never feel that, like, favorite one kid more than the other,"
I
and
think they're lying. I think they're lying.
I've kind of I don't think that they're yeah, I think they're lying too.
I think they love them both, but they have their but they you're human, man.
Yeah, but
You know
also
what I mean?
every kid's personality is different. Oh my, and I don't have kids, so I
Yeah.
won't know that until I do.
Yeah.
But like, I definitely get what you're saying because I kind of always felt that way with my mom. Like, she loved me. I knew she loved me, but I was the more daring child of
Yeah.
my brothers. Like, my brothers were kind of like, they're kind of pussified. I love them, but like, they're very like mama's boys.
Yeah, that's how
Like,
my brother is, yeah.
yeah. Oh, and I was not like that. And my mom and I are very different. So, and my brothers and her, like 3 peas in a pod. And so, I totally get what you're saying when like I think my mom didn't know how to handle me
Mhm.
because I wasn't like bad. Like, I wasn't getting like into a bunch of trouble, but I was just way more daring than my brothers were. Like, I like to party and have fun, and my mom knew that, and she was like, "Oh
Mhm.
my god, she's gonna get pregnant or something," like
Yeah.
especially because I was a
Yeah.
girl, and she would tell me that. She'd be like, "You're a girl," and I'd be like, "I don't care." But I get it because women are, you know, my mom just didn't want me to be one of those girls that needed a man to take care of her kind of thing. So
Yeah.
she was way harder on me. So I'm glad she did because I was like hyper independent for a really long time. And that's probably why I'm where I'm at today. And I'm grateful for it, but I wish like it didn't have to like have been that way.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, for as long as I can remember, I didn't feel like I had a family unit. Like, you're growing up in the 90s, everything's like TV shows and stuff. The internet
Mhm.
is not really what it is now. So I'd see all these families, these close families on TV and stuff. And I
Yeah.
felt like I never, excuse me, I felt like I never had that. And I would be like, well, why can't my mom be like the mom on TV? And, you know, I didn't feel I had that family unit that I wanted. So I went and looked for it other places starting probably in like middle school. I went to a middle school that it was across town in like the bad area of town, you could say, and it was like mostly gang members and
Mhm.
little youngster gang members who the older brothers were gang members and stuff like that. A lot of
Yeah.
fights, a lot of stuff like that. So I kind of I kind of admired like the family aspect that I thought like gangs had, and I was like, wow, I want that.
Mhm.
So I started hanging out with those type of people. Sorry, my throat won't clear. I started hanging out with those.
You can have some water too.
I have some right here.
Okay.
I started hanging out with those type of people because I wanted that, like, someone who would have your back no matter what, and someone who was always there for all that stuff that gangs are like supposed to be.
Mhm.
So I started hanging out with kids who were doing bad stuff, or getting into drugs, or getting into all sorts of shit, and my mom really didn't like that. you know
Right.
and she thought the way to handle that was to um just tell me, stop hanging out with those people, stop doing this. I got older, got into high school, and we started drinking, partying, hanging out with older kids. I was like a freshman hanging out with seniors,
Mm.
and she kind of forbid me to hang out with these guys who were my friends, who I looked at as like my family, like people who cared about me, how I felt at the time, more than my own family did, you know, and she just basically told me, you got to stop hanging out with them or get out of this house.
Mhm. Like an ultimatum.
Yeah. And you don't want to give like a rebellious kid an ultimatum like that. Cause I'm like, I don't care. I'll leave. So she's like, leave. And I think I was 15, and she kicked me out. So from then I was on the streets, staying at older friends' house who were like old enough to have their own apartments. And because of that, in these pivotal years where I'm supposed to be learning how to be a man, I'm supposed to be learning like how to become an adult, I don't have any parental figures looking out for me or teaching me certain things. I have these older, like, gangbangers
Yeah.
and alcoholics and just criminals, or kids that were far worse than me, teaching me how. And I look back on that now, and I didn't think much of it then, but I think about it all the time now that I wonder how much my life would have been different if she would have never gave me that ultimatum and I never would have walked out, or if we could have worked through it a different way and I wouldn't have had to been basically raised, by these guys who were doing worse shit than me, because it ended up manifesting into how I viewed life, what I was doing in life, like well into my 20s, and beyond. So that was something that was like a moment that I could see in my life where it was like a fork in the road and things went the wrong way. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because from then I'm sleeping in cars, sleeping in parks, and
On people's couches.
yeah.
Do you think, though, that you were already kind of like, quote unquote, not too far gone? But I mean, sounds like that kind of stuff started happening in middle school, that even if you were presented with that choice again, like looking back, do you think that you probably still would have did it anyway? Because you were already around that for so long that you were just like, fuck it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was on the streets for like a year, and then maybe a year and a half or something. I don't know. My dad came to me when I was 17. He found me. I don't even remember how, but he basically said, "I'm gonna come move in into my house. You're gonna go back to school." By now, I'd missed almost 2 years of school, and he said, "You're gonna graduate high school, and if you graduate, I'll get you a car." And I thought, whoa,
Right.
I was already not allowed to get my license till I was 18 because of an arrest I had when I was 14. So they took my ability to get a license till I was 18. So getting a car was way beyond something I thought would happen. And, you know, as when someone's dangling a carrot in front of a kid, they're going to go for it. And I did. I moved into his house. I stopped hanging out with all those people. I went to 3 different schools to catch up. I went to this continuation school in the morning till 12. Then I went to these classes at a community college to catch up on high school credits. And then I went to a night school as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I started school at like 8 in the morning and finished at 9 at night. And I did that for, I don't remember how many months, but maybe a year, I think. But to finish up all my credits to graduate on time, And when I turned 18, he kept his word and got me a car. So I was on the right track, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another, excuse me, then another fork in the road appeared that I was thinking about the other day. I just graduated. I had the car. I graduated with a 4.0, and I was going to I started going to community college and everything was fine. But I had this friend who was a manager at a smoke shop that was going out of business. And we stopped by one night and he was just giving away all this stuff in the smoke shop because they're going out of business, right? And there was nothing really there that I wanted. I was never really a big weed smoker, but he had this digital scale, this little scale, and it was like green. I don't know. I just took it. He was like, "Here, take this." I took it. I had no use for it. I wasn't selling drugs. I wasn't buying drugs, anything like that. And I took it home and I put it in my sock drawer. And about a week later, my stepmom went looking through my stuff. I think, she wasn't too happy about me being there, She was kind of looking for a way.
Uprooting her.
Yeah,
Perfect.
she was looking for a way to get me out. So they found this scale. My dad told me we found this scale. Keep in mind, it's still in the box. It's never been opened or turned on, or didn't have any drug residue on it. Yeah, and he said, "You're selling drugs out of my house. I have your daughters, or my daughter's here, and all this stuff. So you're out." So I've been out of high school like a week now.
Wow.
And I'm homeless again. And I'm like, now what am I going to do? I just got my life back on track and I like had all these plans and stuff, and I didn't know what to do. I had some friends who had rented a house and they were older than me, but they were like doing tattoos, selling drugs, partying nonstop, and they were like, "Yeah, man, you can come live here." So I moved in with them, and I didn't know what to do to make money. I had to pay rent there. My grandparents had given me $300 for graduating,
Mhm.
and I one of their friends who was always at the house was a big weed dealer, and he was like, "You can spend that $300 on some bullshit, or you can buy an ounce of weed, and since you don't smoke, you could flip it, and you'll be making your rent money here." And I thought, well, I don't have any other prospects,
Right.
and I had a job when I was living with my dad and going to schools and community college and all this stuff, and I just took off the other direction because
Mhm.
I had to get something going, you know?
Like, it was the fastest, easiest
Y
thing at the
Yeah,
time.
and that's what everyone was doing, and it opened me up. Living at that house opened me up to a whole different type of life that I didn't even I wasn't prepared for, and I started selling weed, which back then was you could get in big trouble
Yeah, it's a
for.
big deal.
Yeah, it was a felony. Um, you get your house raided for selling even little amounts like that. So that's boom. I turned into a drug dealer instead of a kid working a little job going to community college.
Right.
Yeah.
So, when did your drug addiction start? Was it when you were in that atmosphere? Was it before your dad came to you? Was it when you were in the 2 years prior when you were homeless for those 2 years between 15 and 17, where you were just, like, dabbling a little bit?
No, I drank. I like to drink with my friends because I was really an anxious kid and I was really like timid, especially around girls and stuff. And I would drink and all of a sudden I would feel like I was the man. So
Mhm.
I liked drinking, but it was just, we would drink before school, before my mom kicked me out, or, you know, uh, after that, after I cleaned my stuff up and went back to school, I'd just drink on the weekends.
Mhm.
And I wasn't into drugs. Some of the older guys I knew were doing drugs. There was one kid in my neighborhood who was doing heroin, which was pretty rare in the 90s. And I saw it destroy his life. And I swear to God, I would never do that.
Mhm.
It was terrible what it did to him. And when I moved into this house, I can remember it like it was yesterday. We drank on the weekends. And then my first week staying there, it was like a Tuesday. And one of the guys living there came home from work with a bunch of beer. And he's like, let's drink, let's party. And I'm thinking, on a Tuesday, people do this? People drink on a weekday? Like when they're adults?
Mhm.
And then it was really odd to me, but it quickly became the norm. It was like an everyday thing after that. So it was just drinking and we would do some cocaine. I had a lot of money. My weed business expanded rapidly because I was reliable. I didn't smoke, you know.
You weren't, like, cheating people or anything.
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
guaranteed, like, not to test the product.
Yeah, yeah. So it went well. Had a lot of money. Cocaine got introduced, and we partied a lot and did a lot of cocaine. But as far as I didn't look at myself as like a drug addict, although we were doing cocaine pretty frequently.
You just thought you were partying.
Yeah,
Like, "We're having
we
fun."
were just partying. So I never thought of myself as a drug addict. I swore I would never do drugs like you know crystal and heroin and all this stuff. It was just not going to be in the cards for me. So that didn't hard drugs didn't start till my mid 20s, I'd say, something like that.
So you were just, like, partying prior to that. You weren't doing drugs. You were doing cocaine, but you weren't, like, you weren't doing, like, meth or
Yeah, everyone was
heroin or
doing it and it wasn't like consuming my life, so I didn't think it was that big of a deal, although being 18 years old and
Yeah.
doing cocaine 3 times a week.
Looking back, do you think that you had a problem back then?
Yeah, but I think it was still early enough to where I could have stopped it, and it would have been all right. And I did when I turned 19. Their neighbors at that house told us, it's like I think not when I turned 19, but I was maybe late 19. Our neighbors told us, "I know you're selling weed out of this house. I've called the police. You can expect to get raided." So I immediately moved out with this girl I was seeing, sold all my product, and just cashed out, you
Mhm.
know? Um, but at the same time, I had just gotten really sick. I just gotten really sick from probably from drinking and doing cocaine every night. I came down with scarlet fever, pneumonia, excuse me. Um, and I was in the hospital for like a week.
Oh, wow.
And I told the doctor how much I drank and did cocaine, and he was like, "Yeah, that's it, that's what's doing it." So I got really freaked out. At the exact same time, depression and anxiety hit me for the first time ever, which it usually manifests in people about that age range, like 18 to 20.
Yeah.
And it just came out of nowhere. And this was 2001, you know, it wasn't as common,
Like
everyone
mental
didn't know
health,
about it. Yeah, mental health talk wasn't.
totally
So
overlooked.
I had no idea what a panic attack was. I vaguely knew what depression was. So I just thought I was scared to go outside, and I thought I was having a heart attack every time this would happen. So I just sat on my money, and I at one point developed like agoraphobia from these panic attacks. I didn't leave the house or the couch for like 6 months. And slowly my dad found out and made me go to a doctor, and I got on medication, and it got better. But I was so scared of it happening again. I didn't drink or do anything the whole time I was my later 19 and all of 20, the year I was 20, so I thought, I don't have a problem. I just stopped for a whole year.
Right, you're like, "If I can do it for a whole year, I don't have a
Yeah, so I
problem."
thought it was no big deal. So when I turned 21, I started drinking again.
Mhm. 'Cause then you were old enough to buy it yourself, and
Yeah,
you wasn't provided by your friends. It was something you could do if you wanted because you were 21.
yeah,
There's no
yeah.
rules.
Well, I already had that. I had a fake ID since I was 18. That was an actual government issued from the DMV.
Yeah. My
Um,
friend and I shared one.
yeah, with it it was almost identical to me, so it
Oh,
always
wow.
worked. But yeah, when I turned 21, I thought, well, let me just try drinking again, and it went back to drinking every day.
And partying,
Yeah,
were you doing, like,
partying.
cocaine
I
again
was
and
living in Oregon at that time, and there wasn't like I didn't know anyone that sold cocaine, so no, not cocaine and stuff, but we were just drinking and just never getting a job, never going anywhere. I always kind of thought since a young age that like I had this feeling that I think is the prerequisite for depression. This feeling that life is like pointless.
Mhm.
I still struggle with it today. I feel like we're all going to die one day.
Right.
No one's going to remember us. What is the point of this? And that feeling kind of gives me an excuse to just fuck off and do whatever I want.
Mhm.
Life is pointless. I might as well have fun. And
I might as well go out with a boom
yeah,
kinda
yeah.
thing.
So that feeling like breeds depression. I feel like it breeds, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I feel like it breeds apathy, and which is a super easy thing to hold on to when and to use as an excuse for drug addiction and alcoholism.
Right.
Because what's life's pointless? I might as well
Like, you
feel
feel like
good.
you have no purpose
Yeah,
almost. Like,
yeah,
yeah, that I can
yeah,
see why, you were depressed and probably suppressing, like, "Oh, I'm having fun, whatever. I feel like shit right now, but when I'm drinking, I feel invincible."
yeah. I just wanted to have fun and make memories with my friends for my 20s. I had no interest in getting a job. That's because I was brought up since I was 15 or 14 or 15 by guys who were the same. They were drug dealers. Some of them did fraud. Some of them did tattoos. They just did whatever, and I modeled myself after them.
Mhm. And their mindsets.
Yeah, yeah,
And, being that young, you're like a sponge still.
yeah,
So you are who you hang out with, but not only that, but you're so young and you don't know we think at that age, even me, I was like, "I know everything about life. I'm gonna be fine," or whatever.
exactly.
And my mom would tell me like, "Oh," because I primarily lived with my mom. And, the same thing, my mindset, I was like, I'm an adult, I live life," and then
Yeah,
reality check.
that's one of the that's one of the most brutal contradictions about life is when you're young, you hopefully have these resources that have experience that can tell you not to make the same mistakes as them, which is like older people, your parents, your relatives, or whatever. But the ironic part is when you're young, almost always you're not going to listen to it because you think you figured it out.
Exactly.
By the time you figure out you should listen to people and they have this wealth of knowledge about life, it's too old and youth is gone. You know?
And it's too late.
I try to give it to our kids now, and one of them, he listens, and the other one is just like me at that age. Like, yeah, I know,
Stubborn,
it's not gonna,
hard-headed.
yeah, like
I don't want to hear it.
you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and if I could do anything, man, I'd go back in time and listen to people, try to give me advice and steer me in the right direction. But there wasn't that many of those people in my life anyways. My family was kind of like, you're not doing good, we're not talking to you.
Right. Like completely shut you out.
Yeah, I would go years and years without talking to my family. I would go years and years without talking to my mom or my dad or even my brother, and no one seemed to mind it too much.
So earlier you mentioned that your mom and dad were in the hospital. Did you say you got into an accident?
Me?
When the first time they were in the hospital together, you were in the hospital or something?
That was when my brother had cancer.
Okay.
When I was in the hospital, I don't think my dad came to visit me.
Because you had gotten into some kind of accident, right?
No, I had
something, or you had like surgery.
I had a tumor on my spine and a abscess that was like wrapped around my nerves somewhere at the bottom of my spine. So I was in the hospital and then a convalescent home, like learning how to walk again for, I think, 6 months. I was pretty high the whole time.
On painkillers?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure they were, and back then they were just prescribing. That's when they were
2017, so it was like
oh, wow, it actually wasn't that.
Yeah, it was post like opiate epidemic or opiate epidemic. So they knew the dangers of it, but still I had a pretty serious thing going on, so I pretty much got whatever I wanted. Yeah.
Of addiction too. And
yeah,
I mean, it wasn't disclosed in your paperwork either, probably.
No, they knew.
They did?
Yeah, which is
But they also just put like a little disclosure on the pill bottle that says like,
yeah,
could be addictive or something, or like.
That's why it took them so long to find the growth on my spine. Is I would go to the ER with back pain, and they would be like, "Yeah, right, drug addict. Like, of back pain we can't see," and I would be begging them for an MRI, and they would say, "No, we can't do that. No, we don't do that here." I went to this hospital that was one of the best hospitals in Southern California. It's attached to UCSD Medical School, right? So they have everything there. And they even told me at one point, we don't do MRIs here. We don't have an MRI machine at this place. It's in the richest area of San Diego. Yeah.
They just didn't want to give you an MRI?
Yeah. They just thought I was lying. They just thought I wanted pain pills.
Right.
And it was the worst back pain I'd ever felt in my life. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't do anything. I was in constant pain. I wasn't using drugs at the time in 2017, but the back pain was so bad. I had this girl I was seeing go score me some heroin. She didn't know where to find it, but I had someone meet her. I got a needle and some heroin and I shot it up, and the back pain didn't go away. I was so terrified. It didn't even help.
Was that the first time you did heroin?
No, this was
so you weren't
2017.
doing drugs
at that time. I was just trying to be sober. I wasn't doing a great job at it, but
you knew that the heroin would take your pain away, but when it didn't, that's when you were like, something's seriously wrong.
Yeah. So I had to go there, and I had to I did tell the lady that if they didn't figure out what was wrong with my back this time, it was about my 7th time in that ER, I said I was going to go home and shoot myself. I told her, I'm going to go home and commit suicide if you don't figure out what's wrong with my back. And she finally was nice enough to give me an MRI. And then once the MRI came back, they immediately sent me into surgery.
I bet they felt like shit. They're like, man, we made this guy relapse again.
Yeah, I probably should have tried to sue him or something.
Yeah, that's negligent.
It got a lot worse over that month I was going in. And The doctor told me I might not be able to walk again, but they're gonna try their best.
Mhm.
Sent me into surgery, and I woke up and I could feel my toes, so it was alright, but I'd have to, like, basically learn to walk kind of a different way.
Right.
Yeah.
So since that wasn't the first time you did heroin, how old were you when your heroin addiction started? Because it sounds like you dabbled in alcohol, maybe could have had a little bit of alcohol. I mean,
Yeah.
alcoholism it runs, I think it's hereditary.
Yeah, they say it
And your
does, yeah.
dad was an alcoholic, and then you dabbled with cocaine, and then
Yeah, but that was it.
so how did you get into were you still in that environment with those people when you started doing your opioid addiction?
Um, well, what happened was I'd gone to jail all of 2004 to 2005, I don't know, somewhere in there. I got a year in jail, right? So I went to jail, I got out, and I couldn't get a job anywhere, because I had felonies on my record.
Mhm.
My brother let me live with him and his wife. This is before they had kids, and I couldn't get a job, but I had some friends while I was in jail I had a friend who had gotten really big in the cocaine dealing game,
Mhm.
right? And he had tons of money, and he was moving a lot of weight, and he just basically, at that time, cocaine was like exploding in San Diego, and he basically told me, like, "I'll put you on your feet and you can't get a job, I'll give you some stuff, you can sell it, you know everyone." And that's how I started selling coke. He'd give me as much as I want, I'd move it, and it was dangerous, but we made a lot of money. Now, one of my longtime friends, since I was first got kicked out, had been tattooing that whole time. I'd been living with him off and on, and living with him after I got kicked out after high school, and he had opened a tattoo shop, and he heard I was selling cocaine, and he basically told me, "You're gonna come down here and you're gonna learn to tattoo, because I'm not gonna have you go back to jail. I'm not gonna have you go to prison, you know,
Mhm.
and you're gonna apprentice and basically learn a trade so you don't have to keep doing this with your life." So I moved down to where his tattoo shop was, moved in with him, and he allowed me to still sell cocaine for the year I was apprenticing, because you don't make money as a
Right.
tattoo
You're
apprentice,
pretty
right?
much working, it's like almost like an internship, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
you're working
exactly
for
like an
free
internship.
to be a tattoo artist.
Yeah. So the deal was, as soon as my apprenticeship was done, I had to stop selling drugs completely, and I
Mhm.
agreed with that. The only problem was he didn't tell me that he opened this tattoo shop with the money from a backer who was a co-owner, who was like a massive pill dealer. And this was the heyday of Oxycontin and all that. This was like
Oh, like doing painkillers,
2005,
like
6, pharmacies were getting unlimited amounts and selling them out the back door.
right.
So,
They're expensive.
yeah, they were. So this tattoo shop was basically, it was my friend's tattoo shop, but it was also a way to wash money for this guy's illegal pill selling business, right?
Mhm.
So,
So it's like a front.
yeah, it was a front, but also a
But
real
also
tattoo
like,
shop.
"Hey, you're scratching my back and I'm scratching your back because
Yeah.
I get to tattoo and you can help me pay rent on this place, but you're also gonna be doing, like, what you're
Yeah.
doing."
So there was a lot, like a lot of Oxycontin, Vicodins, anything you could name. There was a lot of that being sold out the back while the tattoo shop was
Mhm.
there. So I was learning to tattoo. There was a lot of opiates around, but I wasn't interested in them. Um, I would help him. He was shipping a lot of them to the East Coast because they were like twice as much out there. So he taught me how to ship drugs. He taught me how to get the money back, do all this stuff, and I was just basically the shop bitch.
Mhm.
One day I broke my ankle, and I didn't have health insurance or anything like that. So this is like exactly how 90% of people who become heroin addicts from 2000 on, how their story starts, is they get an injury, they get prescribed pain pills, and then it just goes from there. So I didn't get prescribed them, but I
You knew where
I
to
had
get them.
access to unlimited amounts. So he would give me them, and I liked them. Turned out I liked them, and you got to think, back then there wasn't like this opiate epidemic. People didn't realize how bad it was. It's hard to explain if you weren't there, but it was kind of like it was different if it was in a pill. You thought it's from a doctor, it's safer. We didn't know that they were addictive. We didn't know it was basically heroin in a pill form. We had no one even thought like that. So lots of guys in the shop were taking them, and I started taking them, and I could work harder. I was having more fun. I felt better.
Did it make you tired or anything though?
No, heroin makes you tired, but
Yeah, because it's a downer.
Vicodin, Percocet,
Mhm.
Oxys, they're a downer, but they also give you like a burst of energy. It's hard to explain.
Hmm.
It's different than heroin. They give you this weird burst of energy. So I really liked it. So I started taking them like everyone else at the shop, and we've graduated to Oxycontins because he had those. And this dealer guy, he didn't do any of these drugs, right?
Right.
So I remember first time I came to him and asked him, "Can I get some Oxycontin instead of the Vicodin?" He sat me down and said, "This is a pivotal moment in your life. This will ruin your life. This pill right here will ruin your life. Take
That
it
was
from
your
me."
warning label.
Yeah, and I was like young, and I was like, "Not me. I know what you're saying, but not me."
It's
What
not
I
gonna
mean?
happen to
Yeah,
me.
not
That's what
me.
everyone says
Yeah,
about a lot of things. Like, "Oh, that's not gonna happen to me. That's not
yeah.
me. I'm
So
not like that."
we would take him on the weekends, and one after I was not hurt anymore, and then I got some oxys, and I had a little left over on a Monday, and I had to go to work. And I remember in the morning, well, I might as well sniff this line of oxy before I go to work. Normally, I didn't take them at work, right?
Mhm.
I sniffed a little bit, and I went to work, and I had the best day at work ever at the shop. And I immediately thought, this feels so good. I'm going to do this every day. That's like that addict brain where it's like, if it feels good, let's do like 5 more of them.
Like, if I feel good, what's the problem?
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I did, you know, and it went from there. So just like everyone else who got into heroin, eventually the government starts cracking down.
Yep.
The pills start getting harder to get. All the pharmacies he
And they're
was
more
getting,
expensive.
yeah, the pharmacies that he was getting all his pills from got raided by the DEA.
Oh, wow.
And so his connection got shut off. His pills dried up, and we were running out. And I was getting sick for the first time, like physically sick.
Like withdrawal?
Yeah. So I came into work one day, and there was this new guy who had just started there, and we kind of like didn't mess with him too much. We knew he was like onto hard drugs. We thought of ourselves different because we just took pills. And I was really sick. And he looked over at me, saw me really sick, and he said, "Hey, man, this will make you feel better. I know you don't probably want to do this. Like, I don't even want to give it to you, but this will make you feel better." And I was like, "Absolutely not. Not me. I'm not doing heroin."
Right.
And he was like, "Yeah, you're right. You're right." I went home. I was still so sick. I couldn't go through it. I called him and asked him on his way home to bring me some. And I had to talk him into it. He didn't want to give it to me, And
Almost like another person telling you, this is gonna ruin your life.
yeah, he like told me it would help, but at the same time, he didn't want to give it to me. And he brought me some, and I smoked it, and I immediately felt better, but I'd always said my whole life I was never going to do heroin. So I was really ashamed of myself. I remember crying, like so ashamed of myself the first time I did it. And that's how I first got into heroin.
When did it start to become a problem where you were like, okay, this is like, this is a problem for me? Or like, would you say that, how long did it take you to realize it?
Just a few months with that. A few months, I realized everyone at the shop started switching to heroin because the pills were drying up. And that just happened as a society. It happened all over America. The pills were starting to dry up, and everyone moved to heroin afterwards. Like, if you go into recovery meetings or like a heroin anonymous meeting, I mean, literally 99% of people will tell you this exact same story. It's exactly the same as mine.
I've heard actually a couple people tell me that they were addicted to painkillers and then they got addicted to heroin.
Yeah.
And it happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, it does. And so I realized it was an issue, and I was dating this girl who was doing it with me, and we both decided we need to clean up. And we told her mom, and her dad had just died. Her mom was alone out in Palm Springs. We're like, we need to get out of the shop, even though they were all like my brothers. I had to leave. So we left, and the deal was we were gonna go out to Palm Springs and kick the drugs and live there for a while and see how it goes,
Mhm.
and that's what we did. We got off heroin. I got a job at a local tattoo shop, and everything was good very briefly until, she got introduced to meth, and
Complete opposite.
yeah, she got into meth, and I was like, "We're supposed to be out here getting clean," and it just drove me crazy. Her and her mom were smoking crack. Um, I ended up leaving that situation.
It must've been hard.
Yeah, well, I was dumb and
And that was your support system too.
yeah, I was young and dumb and thought, like, I didn't understand addiction at all, right? So I
Right.
was like, "It's me or the drugs," and she was like, "It's the drugs,"
Yeah, it's always gonna be
Yeah,
9 times out of
yeah,
10.
so she chose the drugs, so I bailed. But I still never had knew what recovery was or that sober people I thought sober people were just old dudes sitting around a room drinking coffee who were like would talk about how they miss drinking or something. I didn't know
Like
like
AA?
yeah, I just thought that's what
That's
it
what you thought
was.
AA was?
I knew my dad went kinda, but he had never talked to me about it.
Mhm.
He never exposed me to it. He never told me I should probably go, nothing. So
So what happened after that?
I came back to San Diego and, resumed partying, just drinking, doing coke, not doing shit with my life. Because I moved in with some other friends who were all
Mhm.
doing the same thing.
So is that when did you start doing heroin shortly after that again?
No, no, I didn't do it for years after that. You
So
know,
how did you get to that point
where?
when you were doing okay, you were still partying and
Yeah,
drinking and probably doing cocaine,
yeah, for
but,
sure.
um, when did you, like, relapse on heroin again? Was it in when you hurt yourself that one time?
No, no. So I came back, and in 2008, I went to Portland. I just wanted to move to Portland. I had a couple friends up there, owned some tattoo shops, and I thought this place looks cool. And I'm up there, and I've been there like a year or so. It's now been like 2 or 3 years since I've done heroin. And this kid I'm tattooing is this local drug dealer kid. He had a lot of money. He would come get tattooed and hang out at the shop. I was tattooing him one time and I noticed he was like sniffing oxys before he would get tattooed, so he
Mhm.
wouldn't hurt. And I was hanging around him a lot and I just started messing around with him. And then that quickly, I didn't realize heroin was huge in Portland, way bigger than it was in San Diego.
Wow, I never would have thought that.
It was massive up there. So I immediately found people who were into it. No one smoked it like they did in San Diego. Everyone used a needle in Portland. So they introduced me
That was
to
new.
using a needle, and it got really bad. So I used there for like a year.
And I know you told me this, so I know Daniel away from the podcast, but I know you even mentioned to me that you were like, "Oh, I'll smoke heroin, but I will never
Yeah,
do
yeah.
a needle." Like, you used to tell yourself that all the
Very
time. Like,
yeah.
"I will never shoot up, though."
Yeah, yeah.
So when you got to Portland, that changed because everybody was shooting up rather than smoking it, like how
Yeah.
you preferred.
Yeah, that's the thing about addiction is it makes you compromise with your morals and do all your nevers. I'll never do this, I'll never do that. It makes you compromise all of that in pursuit of just getting high or scratching that itch.
Mhm.
So I was there and I was smoking at this house with some people. We had just scored some and I pulled out the foil and they all looked at me like I was disgusting. And they were like, if you're going to smoke that shit, take it outside. And they pulled out needles and I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And they basically told me I could get twice as high with half the amount of heroin. And I
Oh,
was,
by shooting up, because it's
yeah, by
immediate
shooting up.
because you're shooting it into your bloodstream.
Yeah. But I was way too afraid to do it. So I
Right.
had someone do it for me. And it
Oh, I
was,
think you told me you were like,
yeah.
"Just do it."
Yeah. That was probably like the first 100 times I shot up. I had someone do it for me,
Mhm.
you know, and that quickly spiraled. and I didn't know there was like a way out, I didn't know anybody was sober. Um, I had met some sober people in Portland, and I just thought it was really weird. Um, but I didn't know a way to get out of there, So
You were kind of stuck.
I was completely stuck and my life was turning to shit. And I thought suicide was like the only way out, because
Mhm.
I just didn't see a way to get out of it.
Like, you didn't think that you could get clean, or you just didn't think that there was a way out because of the people you were surrounded
I just
by?
didn't think I could. I didn't know what a rehab was.
Mhm.
It wasn't like these days where everyone's been to rehab. I didn't know what a rehab was. I didn't know that there was like medical detoxes you could go to. I didn't know. I wasn't exposed to any of that.
Right.
Ironically, because my dad was like so involved in AA, but he never talked to me about it. So I didn't know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
But eventually you did leave Portland and you went back to San Diego,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I got in trouble in Portland.
Oh, yeah.
I had a lawyer basically tell me, "You're gonna do 2 years in prison here. I recommend." She was the first person I told who wasn't a drug addict that I was on drugs.
Mhm.
I was honest with this lawyer, and she said, "You don't need to go to prison for this. You need to go clean your life up and get off drugs and stuff. So I
Mhm.
recommend you just leave Portland and never come back." And I've talked to the DA, and she pretty much said that they won't come looking for you.
Deal. She was
Yeah.
like, "Deal, just don't ever come back here
Yeah.
again."
So I left that night,
Yeah.
I flew on a plane with a bunch of heroin in my pants.
How did you do that?
I cut a hole in the where your belt goes,
Oh,
around
yeah,
your
in
pants
that
on the
inseam?
inside.
Yeah, and then you
Yeah.
put it in
Just
there?
put a bunch of bags in there.
Damn, that's smart.
Yeah, I didn't know if I'd be able to get some in San Diego, but I put a bunch in there, right?
Just in case. You're like,
Yeah.
just in case for later.
Yeah, so I brought some down, and I don't know how I got her to, but I told my mom I needed to stay with her,
Mhm.
and she let me, and but I was just still hooked on it there,
Right.
trying to
Did
find.
she know?
They knew, but my family doesn't like talk about stuff. They knew.
Like, their feelings, are they not confrontational then?
No,
Oh,
not at
so your
all.
mom was just like, "Oh my god," like.
Yeah, they didn't say anything. I hear people talk about, uh, what do you call it? Like interventions and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and how they hate it. And so I would have loved an intervention. I would have been like,
Do you think it woulda
wow,
helped?
they care. Yeah, hell
Oh, because
yeah.
you always kind of wanted them to, like, care.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
lacked that, I guess, nurturing piece of a mother, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Because she
Yeah,
doesn't
for
sound like
sure.
she's very nurturing with you. So
No.
that probably would have meant, like, a lot to
It
you.
would have. It totally would have. And they didn't call me on it. I don't know what they were doing, but they they didn't say anything to me about it. So I still could figure no way out. And I figure one night I've got some Xanax, I've got some heroin. I'm so over it. I hate doing it, but I can't stop. And I decide tonight I'm just gonna take all this shit. I'm gonna shoot all the heroin and take all the Xanax and not wake up tomorrow.
So that was, like, your attempt to
Mhm.
just kind of be done, and
Yeah.
you were just, and especially with that mindset that you had, that you were like, "I'm gonna die at some point anyway."
Yeah.
So you were just like, like I said earlier, might as well just go out with
Yeah.
getting high.
It's crazy to me that I didn't think of like how that would impact my mom and my stepdad and stuff of like finding me, but
But I don't think anybody that is in that state of mind actually thinks about that.
yeah.
Because I've heard people that are like, how could people do this to their mom and to their dad or the person that's going to find them? And I don't think that that's really what's running through their head. They're just thinking about all the pain they're in,
Yeah.
or the person that they hate they are. And that's the whole thing about mental health, is like all that logical shit. You're not thinking that.
Yeah,
You're
for sure.
thinking about whatever it is you're going through, and how miserable you are and depressed and stuff. So that's what I'm saying is like, yeah, mental health is often overlooked. And
Yeah.
people are like, "Oh, you're selfish." And it's like, you don't know what that person's going through. You really think they give a shit about like your feelings right now? Like,
Yeah.
that's not what they're thinking about right now. They're thinking about other things, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not like they're doing it out of selfishness.
Yeah, I thought of myself as more of a burden anyways, right? So this would be, I thought, a good deal for them too.
Mhm.
They wouldn't have to worry about me anymore. They wouldn't have to deal with my bullshit. So this would work for them too, and it'd be okay, right? So I took all that and took the Xanax, and I thought, man, I was really scared, but I kind of just drifted to sleep, and I ended up waking up the next day, and I was so pissed off. I was so pissed off. I couldn't do it right, and now I didn't have any more drugs either, right?
Yeah.
So I
Do you think your tolerance was just so high that that's why it didn't
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you probably weren't even thinking about like I said, logically, you weren't even thinking about that.
Yeah, yeah. I figured it was enough, but I guess it wasn't, you know? So I came downstairs and told my mom I had something to tell her, and I was just so I I was, like, so ashamed, you know what I mean? This was 2010, so it was still way more stigmatized than it is these days,
Right.
and especially in my family, no one drinks, no one does drugs, no one like
It's like
so
cookie cutter family.
yeah, and I came down and I was trying to tell her and I'm crying and I can't tell her, and this will give you a good window into, like, what you think or what my mom has thought of me since I was young. But I told her I've done something really bad and, you know, you're never gonna forgive me and all this stuff, and she looks at me and goes, "You killed someone in Portland, didn't you? And you're on the run." And I was like, "No,
My gosh.
I'm addicted to drugs." And she was like, "Oh, we already knew that." Like, "Oh, yeah,
Why
yeah."
didn't you it's like, why didn't you say anything
Yeah,
to me?
yeah, that's
Why didn't you talk some sense into me?
yeah, and I told her I wanted to get off, and I didn't know how, and she didn't know how, so she called my dad. I hadn't talked to in years, and, um, he recommended, you know, going to a detox and a rehab.
Yeah.
He knew the whole spiel, right? So that was my first introduction to it. I went to rehab, I went to detox, I got sober, I was introduced to AA and NA and stuff, and it, like,
Mhm.
blew my mind. 'Cause I wasn't aware of it, you know? I was, like, reading the AA book, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is, like, exactly my life," you know? Everything these guys are describing from, like, the 1930s is, like, exactly how I feel and how I'm living,
Right.
and it blew my mind that there was other young people who were, like,
Because you
doing
didn't
it
know
too.
anything about
Yeah,
it.
I didn't know anything about it, so I got really involved with that and stayed sober for maybe, like, a year and a half.
And then you relapsed.
Yeah, I started drinking again and, you know, set off this, like, years long thing of, like, getting sober for a little
Mhm.
bit, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 3 months, and just back and forth, back and forth.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I know that in past conversations that we've had, because you used to work at a rehab, right? Kind of?
Yeah, yeah.
So, you told me we were talking about it, you said that when people come to get clean that you would be like, "Okay, like, delete your dope dealer's number," and
Yeah, I
and
should.
to see if they were legit,
Yeah.
and you'd be like, "Okay, if you're not ready to do that, then you're not ready to be sober, you don't wanna be sober."
I don't
Kind of.
know.
I think she said something along those lines, and then I know that when people want to be sober, it's on their own kinda terms, like, they're like, "Okay, I'm ready." Like, you can't force someone to get clean, you can't force
Yeah.
someone to be sober.
Y
It's just it's not possible.
yeah, they definitely yeah, you to have, like, lasting sobriety, you kinda have to do it for yourself. And they say that in all those meetings and stuff like, you know, you have to do this for yourself, you have to do this for yourself. But I'm think about it differently. I'm like a firm believer of I don't give a shit what your reasoning is. Um, just you know, the only thing that matters is the outcome, right? The
Mhm.
intentions behind it don't matter. Like I don't give a shit if you're doing it to make your wife not leave you or for your kids and you wish that you were on drugs or still, you know,
Right.
because the only thing that matters is you're not, you know, because they would tell me I need to do it for myself. I need to do it for myself. The only problem with that is for someone like me is there's a lot of times where I don't give a shit about myself. So why if I'm doing it for myself, what do I care? You
Right.
know? So the thing that's held me down in times where it's hard is like doing it for other people, you know, doing it for thinking of how it would affect my family, thinking about how it would affect, our kids, my wife, my mom, my brother, all this stuff. And that's really held me together,
And that's a
certain times.
completely different mindset that you had when before that, when you were
Yeah.
surrounded by so that was when you had, like, a kind of like you were a completely different person
Yeah.
at that point, completely different mindset. And it's actually kind of crazy because a lot of people, when they get to a certain age, that's just who you are.
I
You have your
know.
character and you have your behavior. You can fix your behavior, but you can't change somebody's character.
Yeah.
You are who you are, and that's kinda it, especially when you're at a certain age, because you've just been that way your whole life for X amount of years, especially in that developmental like, your 20s, you're, like, developing into the person you're gonna be for the rest of your life, and you did, like, a complete, like, flip because
Yeah,
in your 20s.
I was in my 30s still fucking around, and it was
Yeah,
like not getting fun anymore, and I just couldn't find a reason to stay sober long term,
right.
but I never gave myself a chance to stay sober long enough for my life to get better,
Yeah, because 'cause you'd only be sober,
like
like,
a
a
year.
year.
And well, why is my life not like
You
all
expected it to kinda
amazing?
be like that.
Yeah, you do. Everyone does. That's why I always tell people, like, you need to give yourself a long enough time to build a life that you give a shit about losing. When you've been sober 30 days or something, it's so easy to throw away, or a few months or whatever, because
Yeah,
nothing's gotten better yet. And now being sober for years, you develop and create a life that you're like, I wouldn't throw this away for any drug,
mhm,
you know? But initially, what finally got me to really stay sober, and to be completely honest, it wasn't even for me at the time that I finally got like long
like the
term
last
sober.
time you were
Yeah, it was I got out of the hospital, and by then I was hooked. Like 6 months straight of all the oxys I wanted, and then
mhm,
they just cut you off. So initially, I'm going to heroin, of course,
mhm,
but then my brother gets cancer, and it just blew my mind. And I thought I didn't know if he was gonna live or die, and I thought my dad also at the same time got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I thought, "Dude, there's no way I'm gonna let them die still, like, thinking I'm this, like, junky loser,
right,
who can't get it together. There's no way I'm gonna do this. Like, for once, I'm gonna show like, they've been betting on me for years and just keep losing, so for once, I'm gonna give them something they deserve," and that was, like, the only thing I could think of in the very beginning. Um, I was just gonna stop being another issue for my family to worry about. We have these bigger issues now, and I'm still fucking up. I wasn't gonna be just another thing for that. So,
like another thing on the plate, like the plate's
yeah,
already
yeah.
jam-packed, like, I'm just adding to it.
After I got out of the hospital, I spent some months on the street using, and that got really terrible. And then I had this girlfriend who pretty much forced me to go to rehab. And in that rehab, I decided, like, I for once, like, made a promise to myself, like, no matter how shitty I think this is, no matter how lame being sober can be in the beginning, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna go back to using,
Right,
no matter how much it is. And I finally gave myself enough time to have my life develop into something that now it's not just for my family. Now it's for myself. I would never go back on that. I would never throw away everything I have now for
right.
some stupid ass drug.
How many times did you relapse before that last time, like, when you were like, "Okay, this is it?"
I don't know. It's hard to say, like, what constitutes a genuine try at staying sober. There'd be plenty of times where I'm like, I'm gonna quit now, and it'd last like 2 weeks and stuff. But there was like 4 times of
Like,
decent
long
length
term?
sobriety that I'd go back for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Some girl cheated on me, and I felt bad about it, or pissed off, or
Mhm.
whatever.
Okay, and then I know you've mentioned to me, off camera in our conversations just in whenever we talk, but I know you mentioned you were kind of living kind of by Skid Row.
Yeah, that was after the hospital. After I got out of the hospital, the girl that I was dating she didn't use. She finally had enough, and she had I think she had moved and thrown out all my stuff or given it to someone, like, while I was in the hospital. So it was like, you got no place to stay when you get out, you
Right.
know?
And then you have none of your stuff.
I had a friend who let me live there, and I thought she was sober. She wasn't, So we both started using, and that quickly went to shit. And then it was just the streets.
Mm-hmm.
And it got really bad really quick, and I ended up just full blown on the streets. Everyone was sick of my shit. No one would take me in. So at the very end of it, I was sleeping on cardboard in a sleeping bag in like a doorway of some building, like 2 blocks from Skid Row in San Diego. And that was by far the worst time of my life because I'd have to go buy drugs on Skid Row. I'd have to walk through there. I'd get robbed, beat up. I'd wake up with my pockets run through and all my stuff gone. It was like the most demoralizing, degrading, like, period of my life. I don't remember how long it was, maybe 4 months or something.
It was brief, but it was.
That was enough for
Yeah.
me. Yeah, like, that was enough for me to finally show me the most, like, disgusting side of life I had ever seen, to where I was like, I'll do anything to get out of this. And it beat my ass enough to make me fully just over it. I was like fully over it. I just
Mhm.
knew this time, once I got a couple months in rehab, I knew this time. All the other times it was kind of like, yeah, I hope I don't relapse, like as if I didn't have control over it. Like,
Right.
oh, pray you don't relapse, or, God willing. People would always say, God willing, I'm sober and I'll have a year at the end of this month, or what. Like, I don't go by none of that, dude. If it's not God willing for me, like, I'm not going to do it no matter what.
Would you say that was your rock bottom?
For
Was that
sure.
time that
For
in
sure.
Skid
Shooting
Row?
up in a cardboard box downtown San Diego, for sure, rock bottom. That was enough for me.
Right. Yeah, and then after that, was that around the time your brother was diagnosed with cancer, or was that later on down the road?
He
A
got
little bit?
diagnosed like while I think like right after I got out of the hospital. So it was
Okay.
like, yeah,
So right before, so you had that 4 months on like near Skid Row, on Skid Row,
yeah,
and then
he was like dealing with cancer during
right.
that,
And then you were like, this is it. I've seen it all, and this is
Yeah.
not where I want to be.
Yeah, he was sick, and my dad was getting worse, and I just had enough, man. I just really had enough. And like, win, lose, or whatever, I was not going to go back. I don't care what happened in my life. I was not
Right.
going to go back. And I still like live like that.
Yeah. Have you ever been anybody's sponsor?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was super involved in recovery in the early, what do they call that? The tens, like 2010, 11, 12,
Was that when you worked at
13.
that rehab?
Yeah, I've worked at a few since then, but I sponsored people. I'd go to meetings every day. I would, I've worked at different rehabs. I used to go speak to kids in like,
The
it was like
Dare
this
Challenge,
kind of, it was
thing?
like kids who were already in trouble. They were at this
Oh.
like juvenile camp thing.
like at-risk youth.
Yeah, we'd go talk to people in detoxes. I was like super involved, and but I still, relapsed after that.
Well, relapse is part of recovery.
Yeah,
How come you don't do any of that here? I feel like that would go a really long way here, especially with like the giant fentanyl like epidemic happening just in Humboldt County alone. Like,
yeah,
I know it's getting bigger and bigger just around the, United
Yeah.
States and stuff, and just in general. But I mean, it's a big problem here in Humboldt County. So how come you don't think of like
I
doing
probably
that?
should. I used to, when I first got sober this time, I was still living in San Diego for like 6 months, and I was going to meetings all the time, and I was pretty involved in that recovery community there. I knew everyone. And when I moved up here, initially was just living on a mountain,
Mm-hmm.
far from any meetings. So
Oh, because you were living out in Willow Creek, right?
yeah, there was nothing nearby. So I spent a year up there, and I didn't go to any meetings. And then when I moved to town, I went to a few, but it was just, didn't have that like that kinda younger community, or there wasn't a lot of just wasn't like I wasn't involved in it, and I didn't kind of vibe with some of the meetings, so I've been to maybe 6 or something like that over the years, but it's actually ironic because all these other times where I went to rehab or went to AA religiously, I didn't stay sober, and the one time I, like, completely stopped going, I stayed sober,
Oh, wow.
and I don't think that's saying anything, on AA, it speaks more to just, like, me finally being over it, you
Yeah.
know? People in recovery always talk about once you're done, you know, and I thought I was done those other times, but I wasn't.
Looking back, were you just like, "Oh, I definitely wasn't done back then,"
I guess
because it's
not.
different
I
now? Because I feel like some people are ready, but I mean, staying sober, I mean, I can't imagine what that's like, but from what I hear, it's very difficult.
Yeah,
It's the
especially
rest of your life.
yeah, someone who's, like, naturally depressive like me too, it's pretty rough. You're like, "This sucks." You
Yeah.
know, whatever. I can't imagine trying to do it in my 20s. I would never be able to do it, so I give a lot of respect to kids who can do it in their 20s and have that foresight, but I had to, like, burn every bridge and try everything, you know, "I'm just gonna try drinking. I'm just gonna try this. Well, I'm not gonna do" I tried all that shit, so I had to learn the hard way, like, if I drink, I will do drugs. If I do cocaine, I'm gonna feel like shit the next day, and I'm gonna go do heroin, and I just
You
did all that so many times. I tried every single way to do it, and it just never worked, you know? So
so you found what worked for you, and it was just you just
that's my
are
only
sober.
option. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my only option. I will always bring it back to, like, hard shit, unfortunately.
How did you go from San Diego to Humboldt County? I mean, that's a crazy
Yeah,
shift.
so I was working at a rehab, and I had a friend who I grew or known forever, and he had some really big farms here. And one of the other I made 2 promises to myself in rehab that I was gonna not relapse no matter what. And my second one was I was gonna get some money any way possible, right?
Right.
Because all the other times I got sober, I kinda just had this little shitty job, or I did this, I kinda just hung around AA, chased girls, and just my life didn't develop into something that I didn't wanna throw away, you know? And now I'm in my 30s, I need something, like, I need a come up, you know?
Mhm.
So I ran into a friend of mine who was visiting San Diego, and he lived in Humboldt, and he had some big farms. He said, "Come work with me," you know?
Mhm.
I had a sponsor at the time. I told him what I was planning to do, and I'm like, "I need to make some moves. I need to make some real money."
Right.
And he told me it was, like, a terrible idea, and I was gonna relapse, even though I've never liked weed, so I don't care about weed. Um, he told me I was gonna relapse and all this stuff, and then he, like, fired me as his sponsee and told me I was
I didn't even know that was a thing.
yeah, they can do that, yeah. And, he told me, you know, my life was gonna turn to shit. A bunch of people told me that.
But I feel like a lot of people when they're in recovery and they have a sponsor, big life changes like that
Yeah,
are to be quote unquote like kind of avoided.
yeah,
So that's probably what they were like preaching to you is like it's a
yeah.
terrible idea. It's unstable. Like
Yeah, and for a
you're
lot of
stable
people
right now. It's important to be consistent and be on a routine and
yeah,
you're uprooting your life. So I mean, I think they were looking at it for the better interest, but you were also like, hey, I need to get my shit together. Like,
yeah, for a lot of people, it wouldn't have worked. I've seen it
yeah.
happen a lot of times, and so, you know, I I don't, you know, look down on him for saying that because statistically he was right, right? But I knew in my own heart that it was I'm never going back, and I'm gonna do whatever, you know,
Yeah. You're
to
gonna live your
get
life.
something, you know? Yeah. So I came up here. I had nothing going on down there, you know? I was just newly sober, I had nothing going on. So I came up here to grow and get into the game and make some decent money. Unfortunately, I was just about 10 years too late, you know?
Oh, with like the
Yeah, the
economy and
weed
how it is.
economy and
Yeah,
stuff.
seriously.
Yeah. You know, I made some decent money in the beginning, but it was a little bit too late.
Yeah, I feel like that happened to a lot of people. A lot of people that were doing that for their whole lives
Yeah.
had like a real big reality check and they were like, "Oh no."
Yeah, a lot of guys I saw, you know, I saw people make millions and then a year later have nothing. You know, it's rough. Well, the people who didn't save are screwed.
Yeah. And then you just kinda stayed out here after that too, right? Because then you met your wife.
Yeah,
Do you think if you hadn't met your wife, you woulda just went back to San Diego?
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah?
for sure. Yeah. I met her and I stayed here, and then once the weed economy just dropped, I definitely would have left, but, um, I met her, and I just knew when I met her, like, this is gonna be this is gonna be who I'm gonna be with, you
Like,
know?
this is your person.
Yeah. Um, we just got along better than anyone I got along with. She didn't drink, she didn't use drugs. Um, she had a whole life set up, and we just kinda started working together, and, we were growing, we were doing all sorts of stuff, and she's, she's a hustler, and she's just perfectly like, her personality is aligned with mine.
Mhm.
Or totally different. There's some things that are, different about we bicker about like anyone, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's kinda hard to find someone that's has the same mindset as you, has the same opinions as you,
Yeah.
like, across the board, you know? Like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
always gonna have, like, disagreements and tiffs every now and again. That's just, like, being in a relationship and
Yeah.
being with someone in general.
Yeah, she was the person I knew. I was like, "No, I would never find anyone more perfect for me."
Yeah, and especially because she didn't drink, so you never were, like, around, like, that atmosphere of, like,
Yeah,
quote, unquote, like, temptation.
and we both wanted the same things, and, I don't know, it's just I ended up staying here for her, and she had kids who were pretty young at the time, and now they're growing up. Now they're, like, 18 and 16, and
And you were part of that.
yeah,
You got to be part of that.
yeah, it was really cool to be there in someone's life and, like, share my experiences because I tell them, like, anything,
Right.
I don't care.
I feel like you're super honest with your kids.
Yeah, I wanna do the opposite of what my parents did, and I'll tell them
And educate them, you
anything.
know?
Yeah, yeah, and
Especially here. Like, there are so many young people younger than your kids that are, like, addicted to fentanyl
yeah,
and just doing just stuff, just bad stuff.
yeah, we try to she's the opposite of how my mom was. She is very compromising with her kids and understanding that they're kids, like, they're not bad kids, they don't get into trouble and stuff, but, I think I laugh because one of them does, like, the same little stuff that I would do that got me homeless, like ditching school or smoking weed with his friends,
Right.
and we just address that with him like he's his own person. We don't just go, "None of this or you're out." Blah, blah."
Like, no ultimatums. You
Yeah.
actually talk to him.
That tough love shit, it might have its time and its place, but
Yes.
it does, but it also, I think I'm an example of how it can just go the other way.
Yeah, definitely.
On the flip side, you can, enable people into the grave. So you got to have a balance, but we try to do, I try to do exactly, and no disrespect to my mom, I love her, and my dad, but we try to do exactly the opposite of what they
Yeah.
did when I was growing up.
I feel like a lot of people do that, though, that were raised in, like, just people raised differently. Everyone's raised differently, and
Yeah.
sometimes great, you had great parents, that's great. But there's other people that, their parents might have been figuring it out or, like, different upbringings and cultures and stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
I know that personally me is I don't want to do that to my kids, like how my parents were,
Yeah.
And, so I definitely get what you're saying is you just are, like, breaking the cycle in a sense.
Yeah, yeah. Like I think about it all the time. They're so still, even though one's 18 and stuff, they're so young.
And 18 is just so unrealistic, like, knowing what you're gonna do for the rest of your life at 18
Yeah.
and just being yes, you're considered an adult, but you don't know jack shit about life at that
Yeah.
point. And some people do, maybe that grew up differently or something, I don't wanna speak for everybody, but I remember when I was 18, I didn't know shit about
Yeah.
anything, and I thought I did, but I really didn't.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. I thought about them when they were 15. Like, man, this is the age I couldn't imagine this kid being having to fend for himself right now like I did when I was that age. I couldn't imagine kicking them out. Like, there's nothing they could do that would make us do that to him because I know it's just going to get worse for them.
It's not going to get easier.
And we've developed the relationship with them where they're like super honest with us. With me, I had to learn very young how to lie well, because if I told my mom something, she wasn't going to help me work through it. I was going to be in trouble for it. You know what I mean? So we make sure it's not like that. So they'll tell us, I have a friend who started doing pills, or I had, they're super honest with us, and we try to help them navigate that without making them think, we make it just like an open dialogue that they can come to us.
Yeah.
Because I never had that. So I missed out on a lot of, learning a lot of ways to deal with stuff in life. I just had to figure out for myself.
Right.
I'd never want to do that to them.
Are you in contact with any of the people that you used to like use with? Like that are sober now, or like
Yeah.
friends and stuff?
Yeah. Some of the guys that like kind of raised me when I was 15, they're both doing great now. They're both sober. Some of them went to prison for a while. Some of them, there's a lot of people who are dead, but the initial guys that kind of took me in when I got on the streets at 15, I still talk to them all the time, and they're both doing great now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. Do you have any advice for anybody going through recovery, or anything that helped you that could help somebody else?
Oh, man. I don't know. Some people hit me up on Instagram all the time for advice, and I just always try to tell them, same thing like I told you. I try to kind of steer them away from the like dogmatic, like same old sayings and same old thing taught in recovery meetings, because some of those didn't work for me. So
Well,
I try to give them,
different.
I try to give them the opposite of that. Like I told you, I try to tell them it doesn't matter why you're getting sober. If you're getting sober, it's fine. It doesn't matter if someone else says that the way you're sober isn't sober. Like some people who are like, oh, I just smoke weed now. In recovery meetings, they'll tell you you're not sober, get out of here. At least they used to. I don't know now, but they used to. No matter what it looks like these days, I think it's just most important that you don't die, because there's a fentanyl around these days, right?
Yeah.
So it's like whatever works for you. I just try to tell people like it's not going to be awesome. A lot of times I'll sell you on sobriety in those meetings, like, oh, it's so great. My life got so great. Everything's amazing. Da, da, da. I try to be more realistic, because that's how I am. I try to tell them like sometimes it's going to suck. Sometimes you're going to miss it. Sometimes it's going to sound good. But that doesn't mean you have to do it,
Right.
I try to tell them just quitting on your own, like the hard stuff at home is not realistic for 99% of people. So if they can, I try to tell people they should go to a rehab like I did, and get away from stuff for a period of time so you can get your head a little more straight before you hit the streets and come back to it. And I just also try to tell people, your reasoning for it doesn't matter. Just find something to live for, and do it for that. And then hopefully after doing that long enough, you'll have developed your life enough to where you look back and think, wow, this is actually pretty good. I don't want to trade this. I don't want to throw this away.
Like build a life that you're proud of.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the most important things, is because you can only do it for yourself or other people, or you can only do it for other people for so long, right? So you shouldn't bank on that long term. You should really create something that you value more than getting high, And it's hard to do that, and it takes a lot of time, but that's the only way I've found out. Like I would never trade my life now, even though sometimes it's not the most fun, or it's not this or that, but I would never trade all this work I've done to get high once or twice or whatever.
Like throw it all away for.
Yeah. I always tell people, try to give it long enough time to work, I used to think staying sober a year was like the longest time, and if my life wasn't together by then, the sober stuff was bullshit. It didn't work for me or whatever.
Right.
Try to tell people like it's going to take some years. Give yourself 3 years. See what it's like. hopefully by then, you'll have changed so much you can't even imagine going back. These days,
Mhm.
I can't even imagine the type of like mindset I had to even do that type of shit, to live in the places I lived, to, do the type of things I did. I'm just completely a different person, but that takes time.
Right, and how long have you been sober now?
It'll be 7 years in like a couple days.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
Dang, I was gonna ask you too, what's your anniversary?
It's March. I have to look on the app. I think
Oh, you have an
it's,
app?
yeah, it's like
Tells
a
you?
sobriety
Nice.
counter thing. March 19th?
That's
19th.
awesome, dude,
Yeah.
congrats.
Yeah.
That's a
Thanks.
long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. The time just starts flying by. My my stepmom was in sobriety. That's how my dad met her, right?
Mhm.
And I used to ask them, "Why don't you guys go to meetings anymore?" And she told me one time, I've changed so much as a person that I don't even identify with that stuff anymore. And some people do go to meetings for the rest of their life, and that's fine for the community.
It's
The
also just being part of a community
Yeah,
too,
the
if they don't have
community
family or anything.
the community is one of the things that helps the most. And I do miss the sober community I had down in San Diego. But at the same time, what she was trying to tell me that I didn't understand then is you do become a completely different person. You know what I mean? You become a completely different person that looks at that like I'm that's not even a part of who I am anymore. I don't want to sit around and talk about using drugs with people, a
Right.
couple times a week because I don't even think that when bad things happen, you and you're an addict, you think I should get high about this or go have a drink or whatever. But enough time goes by and your brain doesn't even work like that anymore. She told me that and it really stuck with me. And I thought about that because now that's how mine is. Stuff happens or I get stressed out and going and getting like a drink or whatever, my brain doesn't even go there. And I'm so grateful for that. But that took that took a
A
while.
long time,
Yeah, it
right?
took that took uh, this time it took maybe a year, but it sometimes takes longer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanna share or maybe say or
Mm, not that I can think of. I
awesome.
don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining, and
Yeah,
I
thank
thank you
you.
for sharing your story. It's a it sounds like you've really been through it all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.